And welcome to the informational webinar for the Supporting Children, Youth, and Families Affected by the Drug Crisis, Recruiting and Developing Peer Recovery Coaches, RFA webinar. Before we get started, we have a couple of webinar housekeeping items to cover. Please keep your lines muted during the presentations. We will be taking questions and answers at the end. These will be monitored through the chat throughout the webinar. So go ahead, if you have something come up during the presentation, feel free to submit using the chat window at the bottom center of your Zoom window. If any questions are not answered by the end of the hour, we will be sending out a document that covers any leftovers. We will be trying to cover as many as we can while we're on, but if there are more questions than we can answer by the end of the hour, we will get you answers to those. If you experience any technical issues during the webinar, please message us through chat or email peerrecoverycoaches@jbsinternational.com. The recording today and presentation slides will be available to you. They will be posted to our website, www.rethinkthevillage.org. Today's presenters are Stacy Phillips and Karen Yost, and I will hand it off to them to get started.
Good afternoon, everyone. We're so pleased that you could join us on a Friday afternoon and what is a very snowy Friday afternoon here in West Virginia. We're excited to be able to spend some time with you to talk about this opportunity. We hope that you get a lot of information. We're going to go through the RFA. So you'll understand all the different components of that. Again, as Heather said, please put questions in the chat box, and we will answer them at the end of the session, but we wanted to be able to get through the entire RFA before we started answering questions. Joining me today is Stacy Phillips. She is a program manager for OVC. We've worked with Stacy for a number of years on our project, and we're glad that she had time in her schedule. She's kind of busy now to join us in this informational webinar. Next slide, please. This is the agenda. Again, we're going to talk a little bit about OVC and JBS. We want you to meet our partners who are joining us today. And we're just going to basically go through the parts of the RFA, give you some information about those, give you a little bit of behind the scenes information, perhaps, talk about the application, the submission information, and the timelines, and then we'll open it up for questions. Next slide, please. I'm going to turn it over to Stacy now and let her talk about OVC.
Thanks so much, Karen. And whoop, I just want to go, well, woohoo! There's so many on this call. It's so exciting. My name is Stacy Phillips. I'm a program manager with the Office for Victims of Crime. And at OVC, I design and lead some large-scale demonstration initiatives. And this has been very near and dear to my heart. And so it's so exciting to see it come to fruition. And so many of you that are on this call that have helped influence this or be a part of the design and the implementation. And so just really excited to be here with all of you today. A little bit about OVC. The Office for Victims of Crime was established back in the, I think 1989, the Reagan eras, through the Victims of Crime Act. And our money is called VOCA money. If you don't know what VOCA money is, you should. Because every state has a VOCA administrator that administers state formula funds for crime victims. And so it's super important if you don't know what that is, especially as a community-based organization. It's another way of funding. But at the Office for Victims of Crime, our mission is that we are committed to enhancing the nation's capacity to assist crime victims and to provide leadership and changing attitudes, policies, and practices to promote justice and healing for all victims of crime, and we mean that, all victims of crime. And our money is non-taxpayer dollars. It comes from federal offender restitution and from bequests and donations. So as you can see on this slide, we support a lot of different departments within OVC, but really working with crime victims in the immediate aftermath of crime to assist in their healing process and in their well-being. So again, super excited to be here. I'm going to turn it back over to you, Karen.
Thank you, Stacy. Next slide, please. A little bit about JBS. JBS, we have over 36 years experience. Our mission is to create sustainable change in healthcare and social services, education, and in society, with the ultimate goal of improving people's lives. We are a training technical assistance organization. It was woman-founded, woman-owned. And our approaches really are based on a foundation of experience in supporting federal TTA initiatives of national scope and support and importance. And we also do some state work, and we do some local work as well. We have served as a TTA provider for OVC since 2018 with 4 cohorts of grantees serving child and youth victims of the drug crisis and their families. So we've really been privileged and blessed to work with OVC and work with OVC grantees. As you know, children and families are very important to us and are the foundation of our communities and our society. So we're very privileged to be able to work on these projects. Next slide, please. Next, I want you to meet our important partners. We don't do this alone. We are all a team and we're all partnerships. And so we have 2 of our important partners on with us, and I want them to introduce themselves. And Amy, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about Social Current.
Thank you so much, Karen. Hi, everybody. We're so thrilled to see a lot of people at this webinar today and a lot of interest. My name is Amy Templeman. I'm with Social Current, and I'm joined by a couple of my colleagues here today, Karen Johnson and Trudy Gregory. Social Current is a national network organization of 1,800 social service organizations. We provide learning solutions, technical assistance, and accreditation services through the Council on Accreditation, or COA. We are deeply committed to equity, diversity, and inclusion, and to improving broader systems such as child and family well-being so that people have what they need to thrive. For this particular initiative, in addition to partnering with JBS and 2GEMS to support the grantees and to meet the program objectives across the board, Social Current is focused on 3 priority areas. The first one is developing a family-centered peer recovery coach workforce training curriculum. The second one is leveraging COA's existing accreditation standards for peer recovery and reviewing them so that they can reflect what we're learning in this initiative and a new specialized victim-informed approach. And finally, conducting a DEI needs assessment to better understand organizational readiness and capacity. Back to you, Karen. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. We're real excited to have our partners, and they play such a crucial role in our work. And Jerry Lynn Peak, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about 2GEMS. I think you're on mute. We still can't hear you. Jerry, I can't see faces, but we don't hear anything. Oh, so you're going to type. Okay, great.
So maybe while she's typing, we should keep moving.
We'll just keep moving on.
But hopefully maybe her audio will come back before the end.
And Jerry, if it does, just let us know and we'll go back to you. The flow of our funding for this initiative, it comes from the Bureau of Justice Assistance, COSUP, which is Comprehensive Opioid Stimulant and Substance Use Program, and OVC. Coming to JBS is the TTA provider. We have issued the RFA for to get sub-awardees, and then we will flow the money into the peer recovery sub-awardees. So you can see there are multiple steps in this process for funding, and we so appreciate the opportunity to work with Bureau of Justice Assistance, COSUP, and OVC, and their TTA providers on this initiative. Next slide, please. Just a little bit of background. Some of you are familiar with, and some may not be. In 2021, President Biden issued the executive order on advancing racial equity and support for underserved communities. And this really is a way for the federal government to play a part in making sure that all of our communities have access to services and supports. And that's part of the reason why we're putting such a focus on subawardees who do serve those underserved communities. Next slide, please. To give you a little bit of background, we know that many individuals, many communities that are marginalized and underserved face challenges in social determinants of health, access to services. They also tend to live in communities with high poverty rates and high crime, and that leads to stressed out families and then has a direct correlation with substance use and overdose. It also has an impact on children living in those families. And so on average, 8.7 million children 17 or under live in families with at least one parent who had a substance use disorder. And this leads to higher incidence of abuse and neglect within these families. And it also leads to higher out-of-home care for many of these children who also experience incarcerated parents, high poverty rates. And many of these children go into state's custody. They tend to stay in state's custody longer. And those that are in up and out of home care are in out of home care for longer periods of time. We also know that children who live in these families and have these adverse childhood experiences carries over into their adult lives, and overdose is very strongly related to that. But problems that they experience in adulthood include behavioral and health challenges, including high risk for substance use. So there's a correlation between social determinants of health and equities within our communities and our families and substance use problems, leading into problems within the family and ultimately victimization of children. Next slide, please. Many of these children, if you look at the data, it's very strong. Parents who misuse drugs have children who are 3 times more likely to be abused and 4 times more likely to experience neglect compared to children who come from families with no substance use. And they also, we have found in our OVC work that many of these children are polyvictims, meaning that they experience more than one type of victimization. That's been very evident to us in our work with OVC. So it's very important that in providing services to families impacted by substance use, we really do need to focus on the children and the whole family. And that's what we've been trying to do through our OVC work. Next slide, please. In looking at what works with many of these individuals who experience substance use disorders and substance misuse, we know very well that the use of peers, and they're sometimes called peer support specialists or called recovery coaches. We know that these individuals have been so helpful in engaging and helping navigate individuals with substance use disorders through system. And in fact, evidence is very clear that they're of such value that we're seeing them in substance use agencies, but we're also seeing them in agencies that aren't clinical. So when the core principles of peer recovery coaches are intact, they can be very successful in diverse settings, including non-clinical settings, community centers, recovery fitness centers, recovery housing, law enforcement, hospitals, and recovery high schools are now coming to be very popular in many areas of the country. So recovery coaches are critical, I would say, in being able to engage individuals in treatment and recovery, helping them navigate the system and supporting them primarily because they've been there, done that, and got the t-shirt. And if you can work with someone who's gone down the same road you have, evidence is very clear that the likelihood for long-term recovery increases tremendously. And that's why with this project, we're focusing on helping these children and these families by increasing the capacity of our workforce. Next slide, please. So in looking at the eligibility of applicants, and all this information is in the RFA, but we wanted to go over it in case there were some questions or some clarification we need to make. So state and county governments, state being defined as any state of the United States, including and the District of Columbia, Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, U.S. Virgin Islands, Guam, American Samoa, and Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands. Profit and nonprofits, including tribal organizations, faith and community-based organizations, colleges, universities, including tribal institutions of higher education. Next slide, please. Public agencies, Native American tribal governments that are federally recognized, and Native American tribal organizations other than those who would be federally recognized, and institutions of higher education, public and state controlled. Those are all eligible applicants for this project. Next slide. Funding will be prioritized for entities with experience serving underserved and under-resourced communities, because part of this is we want to make sure that we're addressing inequities, and to qualify, applicants must demonstrate experience serving communities with high levels of crime related to substance use, or geographic areas with gaps in crime victim services, or they can be implemented by culturally specific organizations. To qualify for that, the applicants must demonstrate that they meet the definition of a culturally specific organization defined for the purposes of this solicitation as private, nonprofit, or tribal organizations whose primary purpose is to provide culturally specific services to, among others, Black individuals, Hispanics and Latino, Native American, other indigenous peoples of North America, including Alaska Natives, Inuit and Yupik people, and Aleuts and Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and or Pacific Islanders. Next slide, please. Our subawards. We are going to select 10 total subawards of up to $200,000 each, and the projects will last up to 28 months. Timelines are very important. Applications will be due on Monday, February 19th by 11:59 p.m. And I will tell you, that's Eastern Standard Time. I have been hitting the send button at 11:59 for grants in my previous life, so I understand that. And projects selected for funding will be notified by mid-April and will begin in May of 2024. Pretty quick timeline for us. The initiative, the goal of this is to support children, youth, and families who have suffered victimization as a result of a family member or a caregiver's substance use disorder by recruiting, training, certifying, and deploying peer recovery coaches with lived experience. This project is designed to fill in the gaps of peer recovery coach knowledge and experience so they can serve these child victims and their families in a different way. Although it is a workforce development program, we understand and expect that peer recovery coaches will be providing services to individuals and their families in this. But our approach to this is to expand the capacity of peer recovery coaches to allow them to serve these children and these families in a little different way. That's a gap in many peer recovery support services that are really designed to work with individuals. We're expanding this workforce to address the needs of children and their families as part of this. Next slide, please. These are the objectives. And when we thought about this project, we really We really tried to think about how can we expand not only the capacity of peer recovery coaches, but how do we elevate peer recovery coaches and elevate the voices of people with lived experience through this workforce. And we had a lot of discussion about maintaining the authenticity of peer support services, and increasing the value, prominence, and capacity of this workforce within the community itself. Integration, we're going to be providing collaborative, strength-based, and culturally responsive services, developing organizational infrastructure to solidify the role of the family-centered peer recovery coaches, and provide a working environment that adequately recruits, trains, supervises, deploys, compensates, and supports the workforce. And Amy referenced that a little bit when she talked about social current. And then we want to collaborate to integrate this family-centered peer recovery coach workforce into community and non-clinical settings. We've had peer recovery coaches in clinical settings for many years, but we know based on the research that they are equally effective, and actually I think sometimes more effective in engaging individuals and helping them navigate the treatment recovery system better if they're in more community organizations. So we're going to do outreach, we're going to have partner engagement, MOUs, and supportive infrastructure to integrate this new family-centered peer recovery coach model into community and non-clinical settings. Next slide, please, Heather. Specialization. We want to incorporate specialized, family-centered, victim responsive, and intergenerational peer recovery coaches through development of a curriculum. Amy referenced that, through training and through supporting them, because training, as many of you already know, probably it isn't just enough to train. We have to really support this workforce within their work settings and within their community. And we want to integrate a child victim lens into the workforce training and the services provided by the family-centered peer recovery coaches. We want to train, certify culturally responsive, family-centered peer recovery coach workforce according to state and national certification, such as the nationally certified peer recovery sports specialists standards and processes. And NADAC is part of this initiative and will be assisting us in this area as well. And they also serve as on our peer recovery coach advisory group. Accreditation, demonstrate organizational infrastructure necessary for an effective family-centered peer recovery coach workforce, and validate recovery support organizations. Amy talked about national accreditation standards through COA, and we want to establish those as well, because it's very important that organizations support this workforce. They're a little different workforce than standard workforce, and it's so important that we adequately train and we adequately support them to do the good work that they can do. Next slide, please. Target population. The target population for this initiative are children, youth, and families who have suffered crime victimization, including exposure to substance use because of a family member or caregiver's substance use or misuse. Are crime victims affected by drug crisis in their communities, including those experiencing polyvictimization. And as a result of that, they have complex service needs, and the support for them require collaboration within communities, and their support needs to be a little more complex as well. This isn't a simple, you go here, get this, and then you're well again. So we understand the impact within the communities, and so we need to make sure that our workforce is able to meet the needs of these complex families. Next slide, please. The target population, also part of the criteria, is they reside in communities that demonstrate elevated levels of substance-related crime in 3 ways. Drug-defined offenses, which are a violation of laws prohibiting or regulating possession, use, distribution, or manufacture of illegal drugs. Drug-related offensive, which are offenses motivated by the user's need for money to support continued use and or drug distribution, and the lifestyle that includes misuse of drugs and alcohol. Drug use and crime may be common aspects of the lifestyle for these individuals. Geographic areas with gaps in crime victim services. Again, I referenced a minute ago, we want to fill the gaps with these specialized family-centered peer recovery coaches. And the other criteria is members of target populations that are marginalized, historically underserved, and adversely affected by inequities. Next slide, please. These are some important definitions. These are in the RFA. I'm not gonna go over those, but as you are beginning to work and think about an application, if you're so choosing to apply, please refer to these definitions because they're really important. But let me give you a little qualification on the peer recovery coach. Obviously, there are persons who bring lived experience of recovery combined with training supervision to assist others in initiating and maintaining recovery. But in this case, when we talk about lived experience, we're also talking about lived experience in things like trauma, having experienced crime within their communities, having experienced multiple system involvement, child welfare, juvenile justice, criminal justice. So lived experience in terms of this workforce, because it's family centered, lived experience is a little bit expanded from just individuals with in recovery, although that's the main point. But we want to have individuals that have other lived experience that apply to this project. Next slide, please. Expectations and deliverables. Recruit, train, certify, and deploy paid peer recovery coaches. This is a workforce initiative. Implement replicable and sustainable family-centered peer recovery services provided in non-traditional, i.e. non-clinical, community-based settings. Enhance knowledge and build the capacity of certified family-centered peer recovery coaches to address the needs of youth, families, and caregivers affected by substance abuse more effectively. And ensure equitable, just, and culturally responsive service access and delivery. Next slide, please. We expect to use the key dimensions of recovery-oriented services. It's health, home, purpose, and community, as well as any new federal model standard for youth, family, and adult peer support. Build collaborative arrangements with other organizations or partners to guarantee program success. Again, because the needs of these children, these parents and caregivers and family members are complex, and it takes complex responses to improve their lives. So that means partner organizations. It does take a village. We want to create organizations that provide supportive environments for this workforce and work in collaboration with JBS and its partners throughout the implementation period to meet all the deliverables, including any additional deliverables that may be required by OVC or JBS. Next slide. Collaboration. Again, we've talked about our partners and we've talked about the needs of these families that are complex and require collaborative efforts. This is no different. And so some of the expectations we have for this project are that our subawardees complete the organizational community readiness, strengths, needs, capacities assessment for integrating victim-informed family-centered peer recovery coaches. Amy referenced that a few minutes ago. Engage in coaching and other TTA activities. We expect sub-awardees to participate in virtual and in-person site visits and sub-awardee meetings, collect and report required performance data, assess and plan for program sustainability. And let me kind of give my little spiel on sustainability. Sustainability isn't something you do the last 3 minutes of your project period. So please, as you're developing your applications, consider sustainability from the front end. We don't want this program to go away, and we've built in some sustainability features through the certification of peer recovery coaches and through the accreditation of organizations to be recovery supportive organizations. So we've built some of that into it, but it's important that you work on sustainability from the get-go. We expect you to collaborate with external project evaluation team, that's 2 gyms, to complete evaluation activities as required, and to contribute to the evolution of the specialty training curriculum, the specialty certification standards, and a replication guide by embracing the specialty training and sharing your input and your experience with us. This is as much about lessons learned. We're moving down a new road and expanding the peer recovery workforce to fill in the gaps to serve the needs of children and entire families. And it will be very important as we move through the next few years to learn from what our communities are doing. So those lessons learned and those tips of the trade, and this is what works and this doesn't work, is going to be very important. And we're going to be counting on our communities to assist us in that effort. Next slide, please. So let's get to the application and the submission process. Applications must include, and must is in red, this is very important for you to pay attention to, your organization's general information. And by this, I mean the name, the type of organization, the address of the organization, the contact information, and those kinds of things. We really need to know that. So that needs to be included. Your project abstract will be no more than 400 words. And we'll talk about that in a second. And a project narrative. The narrative is a description of the problem. And by description of the problem, I really mean what's going on in your community. What are you seeing? What is the impact of substance use on the lives of children and families within your communities? Now, what does it look like? What are some of the challenges that you see within your communities? So describing that. Then when we get to the project design, in the project and design, you're going to talk about, this is what we plan to do. What kinds of activities are we going to have? Describe your strategy for recruiting, training, supervising family-centered recovery coaches. Addressing the needs that you have talked about within your problem description. What actions and activities are you going to undertake to fulfill the goals and objectives of this project? And a description of the methods that you are going to use to carry out each of these activities. And then you'll have a timetable, and we'll talk about that in a second. Within capabilities and competencies, we're really talking about the lead applicant's capacity and capability to implement the project, provide oversight, to manage the project. What experience does the organization have to be able to do that? There will be a coordinator that will need to be hired for a defined amount of time. What resources do you have that can support the workforce to support the needs of these children and youth victims? and any experience with polyvictimized children and their families or caregivers. If you are requesting consideration under one of the two considerations, state that here. We're talking about the culturally specific organization. You can talk about that here. What experience do you have serving underserved and under-resourced communities, including those that experience high levels of crime related to substance use, and geographic areas within the gaps of these services. And then your capacity to provide peer recovery coaches specifically tailored to individuals experiencing substance use disorders. If you currently provide peer recovery services, how do you plan to scale up to meet this new expanded workforce? Clearly define the specifics of your staffing approach, and identify any capability or competency challenges that you think you may experience, and your ideas for how you want to overcome those challenges. You will also identify here key organizations and individuals that will assist you in implementing this project, describing roles, responsibilities, capabilities, and competencies of each. You also have letters of support, which will go in the appendices. Performance data, and plan for measuring performance. You are not required to submit performance data with the application, although part of every project is that we will be gathering data and we will be gathering information about activities. We will be reporting to OVC and also to GEMS. Our evaluator will be evaluating our story of our journey in this project. So there will be data required to be submitted for the project, and you will need to outline in your application who's going to be responsible for that that data process, and how are you going to use your data? What are you going to do with your data? So that will need to be clearly outlined in your application as well. All of this information is in the RFA. Next slide. Let me talk just a minute about the narrative. The narrative, or the abstract, is 400 words. Is there a slide for that, Heather? I believe there is. Yeah. So let's go back and I'll catch that up in a minute. I'm jumping ahead of myself. Time task plan by month that clearly identifies goals, objectives, core activities, your deliverables, and your products, and a budget project. And you can use the online budget detail worksheet, which there's a link to that in the RFA, including, the associated narrative that goes with that. And then appendices, key staff resumes, staff budgeted at a level of 20% or more, letters of support, no less than 2, any documentation of a federally negotiated indirect cost rate that you're going to be using for this project. You'll need to submit that documentation of that cost rate, and any MOUs with partner organizations if applicable. Those can go in the appendices, and they don't count toward the limit for the narrative. Next slide, please. Your abstract highlights the purpose, the goals, and the objectives of the project, includes your primary activities, expected outcomes. This is brief. You only have 400 words. And talk about your service area and your intended beneficiaries. So that just goes in that brief abstract. Should be double spaced using 12-point standard font. Next slide, please. The narrative format must also be double spaced. Use a 12-point font. Have no less than 1-inch margins. Should not exceed 20 pages. For the narrative. Again, this does not include the appendices. Pages should be numbered for that narrative. how to submit your application. Completed applications can be emailed directly to JBS Peer Recovery Coach inbox, and this is where you can send it. The subject line must include application for peer recovery coach project. There's a size limit to the file, but it's huge, so you should have no problems with that. Again, the submission deadline is Monday, February 19th, 2024 by 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time. So what happens when we get all of these applications in? Well, we have an established process for reviewing, evaluating, and selecting our sub-awardees. JBS will screen applications to ensure that they meet the basic minimum requirements from the no more than 20 pages, double spaced. It has all the different parts it needs to have in it prior to any other review. And once we have reviewed those and determined which ones meet the technical, what we call the technical requirements of the project, JBS staff and external subject matter experts will evaluate applications for merit. And this group will include partners, our peer recovery coach advisory group, and other subject matter experts as needed. It will be scored, and scoring will be based on problem description, 20%, project design implementation, 45% of the score, capabilities and competencies, 20%, performance data and plan for measuring performance at 10%, and budget at 5%. So these will, all the applications will then be reviewed for this technical merit. JBS and the selection team, with approval of our peer advisory group, will make recommendations to OVC, which retains the final selection authority. Again, funding timelines. JBS expects to make selections and subawards by mid-April of 2024. Selected applicants will then enter into a subaward contract with JBS. Project date to start May 2024, and projects can last up to 28 months. There are resources that are here in this in the slides, but there are a lot of resources in the RFA that you can use as well. So they're just all kinds of information that we've put in that we thought might be helpful for some of you, but many of you you have resources as well. But these are in the RFA as well. So good. My hope was that we would be done by 2:45, and then we would leave a few minutes for questions, and right there we are. So Carlos, do you want to go through some of the questions? Again, we will answer all that we can today, but if there are some we don't get to, we will make sure that they are answered.
Yeah, absolutely, Karen. I will go ahead and start at the top here. Folks have asked just real quick about slides being available and a copy of the or a recording of the webinar. And yes, we will make those available to folks. We'll send them via email, but also post them to the rethinkthevillage.org website. So those are in the chat. Also accessing the RFA, I believe that I attached the RFA in the chat as well, but also a link is in there too for folks who may still need to access it or be looking to send it to other folks. Here's the first question, Karen. Someone asked, our primary focus is providing substance use disorder and mental health treatment. We provide that treatment to everyone. Are we disqualified?
No, you are not disqualified. Keeping in mind that we are expanding the skills and the knowledge of the PRC workforce, but we will be expecting the workforce to be placed in non-clinical community-based settings. We want them in non-traditional settings.
Thank you, Karen. The next question is, our nonprofit has a behavioral health clinic as well as many other non-clinical services. Are we eligible to apply?
Absolutely.
Okay, Karen, here's the next one. Do you see this as primarily funding the training of the family peer workforce and then finding them partner placements in community settings to provide direct services, or do you expect the funding over the 28 months to both hire staff and do the training of the workforce and also employ family peers to provide services?
We do expect the workforce to be hired, trained, supervised, and paid through the project. However, this can happen in multiple ways. Partners can also do it, but this is supported workforce. So we do expect them through the project and hopefully sustainability after the project to be paid, to be hired, paid, supervised, trained, and supported.
Karen, could you also elaborate a little bit on the providing direct services?
Yes. Even though our approach to serving these children and these families is through enhancing the knowledge and skills of the workforce, the whole purpose of having peer recovery support staff is to provide direct services. We do expect them to be providing direct services. What we are trying to do is give the resources and help establish the processes, the training, and the organizational support to support the workforce.
Excellent. Thank you, Karen. There's sort of a second part to that question. And is there an expectation of budget split between those two buckets, the training, certification, and direct services? And if so, is there an expectation of budget split?
What we expect, Stacy, were you going to say?
I was just going to add in, and I'll let you take over, but I just wanted to add in that the funding is going to be used. The technical assistance is going to provide the training and the certification. You're not going to be paying for that. You're going to be paying to deploy the peer recovery coaches. And I'll give it back to you, Karen.
This is my question. Can I ask a follow-up just based on that answer, Stacy? Is that acceptable, Karen? This is Rob. Sorry, I'm the executive director of Unity Recovery. We're a recovery community organization in Philly, Pittsburgh, and Texas. We're looking at the Texas market for this, which already has a state family peer credential as well as family youth credentials. So given that answer, Stacy, are we eligible? Like, that curriculum is what the state uses. They won't accept another one. So can we use that? Or do we expect it to use the TA training and credentialing process, which our state, like Texas, would not accept?
That's a loaded question, Robert. If I'm honest with you, the expectation, because and Karen can actually elaborate on this, but with NADAC being involved, there's actually a curriculum that's going to be developed that's going to be specifically for these peer recovery coaches. So it may be something that can be enhanced. Karen, what are your thoughts on that?
We don't intend to supplant any existing standards. And in fact, part of what we want to do is become aware of, and we know most states have state certification standards. We don't want to supplant them. We want to enhance them. And working with NADAC, we're hoping to add an endorsement specifically for family-centered training that we're developing. So yes, we will expect if you're using the money for this, that they undergo the training that we are providing. It doesn't take the state away, but it enhances, we hope.
Yeah, so we could layer it on top of, like, if we hire 3 family peers, send them to the state training so they can be credentialed, layer on the NADAC training through y'all's TA, which you pay for, and then deliver services for 28 months is how you would see this ideally working.
Yes, because I mean, NADAC is national. And sure. So if your staff are state certified and you want to use this training and this endorsement to achieve national certification, certainly you could do that. The other piece of this, Rob, is the organizational standards for support that we've talked about. And that's part of this as well. And so all of our organizations then will benefit from the TA we're going to provide to develop good organizational support. Did that answer your question?
It did. Thank you for the follow-up. We'll probably be emailing if that's the best mechanism, just some follow-up, unless y'all are taking like secondary, like 30-minute calls to ask more direct, but I can follow up on that offline. Thank you for
Or
taking.
you put it, if you have a follow-up, go ahead and put it in the chat box and we'll respond to it.
Thanks.
Carlos?
Yeah, all right. So I think that the next question that was in the chat just came up right there. So I'll jump to the next one. So I see, are peer recovery coaches a reimbursable role taxonomy wise?
In many states, the direct services part is reimbursed. But you would have to be familiar with your state, how that they reimburse those. But in many states, yes, that is true.
All right, the next question, Karen, is, so are you asking us to write a curriculum for these family-focused trainings?
No, we are not asking. You're going to work with us and through Amy and through our partners we're going to develop the curriculum for you. What we're going to ask applicants to do is train their peer recovery coaches in the curriculum.
All right, the next question is, would I be able to apply if we anticipate having our substance use disorder program running in 2025? We just started the application process.
Yes, because you don't have to be a substance use provider to apply for this funding.
The next question is, does it matter if the participants meet state or federal certification standards? And I know you addressed some of that right now.
We're anticipating, we can't supersede state certification, obviously, but through the work of this project and working with Social Current and working with NADAC for the national standards, we would certainly, we're providing an opportunity to achieve that national certification. So yes, we would want there to be movement toward this national certification.
Okay, the next question, Karen. For catchment areas that may have both a family peer curriculum and state certification, as well as a youth peer specialist curriculum and state certification, how would you prefer that be included given the priority populations? And they offer an example. In Texas, for example, family peers support family members, youth peers support youth. Family peers do not support both and are often different types of peers across a lot of characteristics.
We don't want to supplant what's already there. We hope to enhance, keeping in mind also that this peer workforce will be placed in non-clinical settings. And so there may be a particular population that you choose to use this money for that it doesn't currently exist. So we don't want to supplant anything. We want to enhance what's already there. And so part of what you have to do as an applicant is how do you leverage what already exists against what we can provide to meet the goals and objectives of this project.
Okay, thank you, Karen. So here is the next question. And it's sort of a couple of short ones. So I'll get through the first two. The first one is this a new model or pilot? And is there an existing model?
This is new it will be new in many states and many areas, because like in West Virginia, for instance, where I live, we have certified peer recovery coaches. They are not family centered. And so this will be innovative. Another really innovative piece is the organizational readiness and the organizational support standards that we're working to develop. That is new. And so it's going to depend on what you currently have within your area and figuring out a way, again, to leverage what you already have versus what we're going to offer as this project.
And there's another question here. Can you provide clarification regarding JBS considering applications where 2 or more entities carry out the proposed project? Is that a preference or a requirement?
It is not. There only one organization can be the applicant. However, just as we have partner organizations as we're implementing this project, we would hope that there will be partner organizations for communities as well. And so there would only be one applicant, but then that organization could be, you know, a subrecipient under the applicant organization.
All right, Karen, the next question is, the eligibility requirements state specialize in substance use treatment and services. We do not provide clinical treatment, but have been providing recovery support services through recovery coaches ever since it became available. What is the standard for substance use treatment?
A recovery community organization qualifies. No problem.
Excellent. The next question is, would we be disqualified if we also provide clinical services? I think you've already said that that is no, you're certainly qualified. Here's the next question. Does lived experience include family members of substance abusers who are in recovery from the effects of addiction, trauma, and dysfunction?
Absolutely.
Right. So here's another question around the certification objectives. Are peer certification programs other than NADAC acceptable?
It's whatever your state allows is acceptable. We are working with our national organization, Social Current, with NADAC, to give an enhancement for this workforce that will go into national. But if you're certified by another certifying organization, that's perfectly okay. We'll enhance their knowledge and their capacity.
Here on the next question, does this require an abstinence approach to recovery, or is harm reduction approach supported?
No, it does not require an abstinent approach.
Right. The next question, Karen, is there a minimum or maximum numbers of coaches to be trained and deployed?
No. That's part of the application process. You tell us how many.
The next question, Karen, will there be a template for quarterly and semi-annual reports? And I can answer that one. Yes, there will be a template sent for that. Here's the next question. Are grantees expected to employ all of the program participants after they are certified, or is the expectation for participants to be hired elsewhere in the community after certification?
The goal of this project is to increase the community's capacity to develop, deploy this workforce. So it would be hoped that as we develop this curriculum and as we teach communities the curriculum, then the organizations themselves can continue to train the workforce wherever they're hired. So yes, we would hope that this curriculum serves communities to continue to enhance their capacity for family-centered peer recovery coaches long after the funding period ends.
Thank you, Karen. All right, so there are still several other questions. As we mentioned at the beginning, we will be providing a document on the rethinkthevillage.org site that lists all of the questions that were asked, including all those that are in the chat and the corresponding answers. Karen and Heather, I'll send it back to you all to wrap up.
Did Jerry ever get her audio working? Jerry from Two Gems? I want to give her a chance to say hi. So Jerry has written, Two Gems Consulting is a Black woman-owned evaluation, research, and technical support firm. We are honored to provide developmental evaluation support from a culturally responsive, equitable, and liberatory perspective, and we'll be telling the story of designing and implementing this program, including perceived impacts. We're really excited to have our partners. Amy, thank you. Trudy, Karen, Jerry, for joining us. We really want to thank you all for taking time on a Friday afternoon to spend some time with us. You can see, again, important websites, peer recovery coaches at jbsinternational.com, rethinkthevillage.org, and ovc.gov. Stacy, I'll flip back to you and let you say the final words.
Well, thanks. And thanks again for everyone. Thanks for all of your thoughtful questions. I hope that we did as much justice as we can answering them. But we are super excited about this. This is a really great way to help families. This is very personal for me. I often think about what things would have been different in my family had we had a peer recovery coach, a family-centered peer recovery coach, when my children's father was not in recovery, and even throughout his recovery. So we're very excited to have all of you show so much interest, and we're excited to get your applications.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend. We will follow up on the questions if we didn't get all of them answered, and we will get them out, and they will be on the Rethink the Village website, as well as the presentation in the slides. Thank you all so much. We appreciate it. Have a great weekend.